Who are you? Life has a funny way of getting us to ask that question. And as it turns out, for me at least, it's a lot simpler than I thought. But right from the beginning, right from my roots, the answer would be seated. My mom and her family immigrated from Egypt in 1970. My grandfather, intent on moving to Los Angeles, stopped in Racine, Wisconsin to visit his brother and never left. My father's family survived the Holocaust and had my father in Europe and came over on the boat to America and traveled around the country for a little while until they saved up enough money and purchased a small apartment building in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where they lived the rest of their lives. And my parents met working at American Motors in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where I was born and raised, a male, Muslim American, first generation, with Egyptian, Polish, Ukrainian roots. To be honest, most of my childhood, outside of the fact that my parents got divorced when I was 2, was pretty much like Pleasantville. I would go out and play baseball in the summer in the streets with the neighborhood kids until my parents would call me in for dinner. I was in the Boy Scouts. My whole family lived within walking distance, and I honestly believed that this was the path my life was going to take for the rest of my life. It didn't really start shifting until I was about 11 years old. My mom and stepdad got divorced, and just under 2 years after that, perhaps one of the most profound events occurred in my life that brought me right back to that question: who are you? I was sitting in class, watching the horrible events unravel on TV the morning of September 11th. I couldn't even understand what I was seeing. And as I was sitting there, I heard a voice from the girl who sat behind me that I had known for years say, "Thanks a lot, Ahmed." Thanks a lot? That's not me. That's not even close to who I am. And I'd soon realized that I'd spend a lot of time hearing about who the world and society thought I was as a Muslim that had no bearing in my own reality. Now, as many of us do, we start looking for ways to express ourselves, and I turned to the only obvious choice: music. I picked up a couple of instruments and started playing and fell in love. In fact, it cemented a dream in my head at that time that I was now going to be the next big singer-songwriter. And I spent the rest of my adolescence pretty much spending all my time writing music with a very close friend of mine named Tim, and I held on to that dream very tightly, in fact, right up through college. And of course, at that point, I'll be honest with you, I sort of looked at college as this thing that was just going to keep me from getting out to Los Angeles to get some job to pay the bills and start pursuing my real dream, busking on the streets, waiting to inevitably get discovered. My mom, ever as supportive as a mom could be, said to me, "Honey, that is a great dream. You should pursue that. Also, maybe just get like a college degree. It seems useful, you know, just in case it doesn't work out." And I begrudgingly enrolled in college, and I ended up at Columbia College in Chicago, where I lived for 6 years. And to be quite honest, my theory was I should at least get a degree in something that I find useful for my career path in this music industry. So I started studying music engineering and production. I thought this way I could produce my own albums. I walked into class one day, and my professor is standing there, turns and looks at the entire class and says, "You will never get a job in this industry. We were moving from analog to digital, but it stopped because vinyl's cool again, and all the people who were supposed to retire aren't, so it's going to be another 10 to 15 years before anything opens up for you." Okay, well, this is supposed to be my safety plan, so I should probably figure out something else to do. So I tried a couple of things out, but I couldn't find anything that I could do that would get me out in the same amount of time, because again, in my head, this is just holding me back from the busking. So what I ended up doing was walking into my advisor's office, and I said, "You know what, these are the tokens I've won so far. What prizes do you give out?" And he said, "If you switch a couple of classes," serendipitously, he says, "you could get a degree in advertising production." Well, I will never use that, but if it gets me out in time, I'm in. And so I did. I got my degree, and almost immediately after getting my degree, I packed my car up and drove across the country to Los Angeles so I could start with the busking. Of course, In my head, I'd already had an internship in Chicago, so I could certainly get hired for an entry-level job, right? Wrong. They will not hire you, at least in Los Angeles, for an entry-level job until you have experience. Well, what do you do with that? If you're me, you take on 5 internships at the same time, so no one could ever say to you again that you don't have experience. And as I started rolling through those internship experiences, I finally got a phone call from a post-production house in Santa Monica. And they said, hey, listen, we've got an internship opportunity for you. It's 3 months long. If everything goes well, though, it'll turn into a paying gig. I was thrilled, finally. I could just get some money in the door and then go to the busking. Except that I had one other conversation happening with my cousin who introduced me to someone that he'd recently worked for named Ben Singer. Ben was a manager for up-and-coming artists, and that seemed a little bit closer to my dream and who I saw myself being than the Post House. So after emailing Ben to see if there might be an opportunity there for some work, Ben emailed me back and said, I'm looking for an office manager. Why don't you email me on Monday? Great, no problem. I waited until Monday. I followed up. He sent me an email back and said, thanks for following up. Why don't you come in on Thursday and you could start? I'm sorry, did this guy just hire me without ever meeting me? I was freaking out. I literally jumped off of the couch. I know people say it, but like I jumped off of the couch and I ran over to my cousin with my email and I was like, this is how I'm reading it. Are you reading it the way, because I'm reading it this way and I don't know if he's saying what I think he's saying, but this is what I think he's saying. And my cousin's like, yeah, I think that's what I'm reading too. I freaked. I called the post-production house. I apologized. I'm sorry I can't take the position, but to be quite frank, I've got a paying gig. And what I'm not telling you is also this seems a little bit closer to who I really am. So I went in on Thursday to meet with Ben. I sat down, and Ben looks at me and says, so the internship is on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I didn't want to let on. I waited a moment and calmly said, hey, what happened with that office manager thing? And he said, oh yeah, Stacy, I hired her, she's fantastic. And in that moment I realized what he meant when he sent the email, which would have made more sense than hiring someone you'd never met to run your office, was I'm in the middle of trying to hire an office manager, so I don't really have time to talk about this internship, so let's talk about that on Monday. Now, having absolutely nothing to lose and still seeing the opportunity to be in a field that was much closer to where I saw myself, I took the opportunity. Taking that position would change everything. Every day I'd walk in and Ben would say to me, hey, do you know how to edit videos? Yeah. Do you know how to design concert posters? For sure. Can you make VFX? Why not? Can you design concert tickets? You bet. I didn't know how to do any of it. But as soon as he would ask, I would bury myself into a dark little room. I'd hop online, I'd look up some tutorials and some columns and read some things, and I'd teach myself sort of autodidactically how to do it, and then I'd get it done, and I'd walk back out and be like, here it is. And it was great. And Ben said to me at the end of the internship, you are the best intern I've ever worked with, and I'd love to keep you here, but I can't afford to. So he said, I have this artist, this up-and-coming artist, who's getting ready to go out on tour named Andy Grammer. Do you want to be his tour manager? Let me be very, very clear. I had no business being anybody's tour manager, so I immediately turned around and said yes. And we went out on the road. Now, at the time, Andy was still up and coming. He was opening for other artists, so I had to wear a few more hats than just one, and one of those hats was creating content. And as I started to do that, I kind of started to really fall in love with it. Of course, as we would tour the country, we would come back and inevitably wind up near Los Angeles, where we had lived, and his family and friends and some of his roommates would also reach out and ask to get on the list so that they could come see their friend play. Unbeknownst to me, this is actually also the first time I would meet my future business partner. So in any case, after we Hello. Wow. Okay. So after 3 tours, Andy was getting ready to headline his first tour. And we all knew that it was about time that they hired a tour manager who could meet the demands of a headlining tour. And I also, at the same time, recognized that I had found this new passion. And I decided to make a career shift. I decided to start focusing on creating content. See, I had recognized the power of content to connect with an audience and help change a narrative. In fact, I'd grown up observing one of the most powerful narratives being crafted and sold through the media. I grew up hearing a narrative that I hated, that every time you hear the word Muslim, the next word you think of is terrorist. And I thought, well, if I could just get out there and somehow create content that was inherently good, maybe I could start shifting some of this conversation. Maybe the world would start seeing me the way that I saw myself. So I started with my cousin who had just been laid off. We decided to start a little production company, and of course I told Ben and everybody that I knew what we were doing, and Ben called and said, I've got a little show that Andy's doing at a recording studio. He's doing a live album from it. Do you want to come and film it? Of course we said yes. We had no resources. We had $500, but everything somehow came together, and it was beautiful. We had an amazing experience, and Ben called again when he'd signed a new artist and said, I've got another artist that I need an electronic press kit for. Do you want to do it? Of course we said yes, but this time the difference was, for some strange reason, this had never happened before, they needed a DVD to screen at some event that they were doing. So I got everything ready, and I called Ben's managing partner, Josh. And I said, hey man, the DVD is all ready to go. So Josh said, great, I just so happen to be on your side of town. And I also happen to be with the director of the music video, Justin. Do you mind if we come by? He's got his DVD, he needs to test it as well. I said, yeah, of course. And as they came into the door, so too does Justin Baldoni, who was the director of the music video, Andy's roommate that I had met. And as I saw Justin, I said to him, I had making this career change. This is what I'm doing in my life. I really want to make content that can change the world. And he said, that's what I'm doing too. So we started testing the waters. In fact, we started by doing some reshoots for a PSA music video for the Union Rescue Mission in downtown Skid Row. And what would happen next would lead me right here to this stage. In fact, what we started doing was picking up shots for another series that was a micro-documentary series profiling those experiencing homelessness so that we could share their stories in hopes that people would stop walking past them as if they weren't human. And we had a great time doing it, putting it together, and he called me and said, hey, I'm just starting this series called My Last Days. Do you want to do it together? It's a doc series about living, told from the perspective of people who are dying. So we did it together. We partnered with our friends at Soul Pancake, and we did 7 episodes. And the last episode was about a young kid named Zach Sobiek. What happened next we could never have anticipated. Over 15 million people watched just Zach's episode. It crashed Upworthy's site, and those views turned into Zach's song Clouds going absolutely viral. And because Zach at 17 was wise enough to attach the royalties of his music to an osteosarcoma research fund, it raised over $1 million in research for osteosarcoma. And that, actually just towards the end of last year, turned into raising money for a new drug trial that will hopefully stop osteosarcoma. You know, as I was reading through some of the comments on these videos to see what people were saying, there was one that I mention often that hit me. This young guy was watching and said, today I was going to commit suicide, but I watched this, and I now understand the value of my own life, and I will no longer take it for granted. We were stunned, and I knew I had found my life's purpose. In fact, it didn't really have anything to do with producing necessarily. What it did have to do with was recognizing that I was here to use the talents that I was giving of storytelling to be of service to others. We started our production company then, Wayfair, and ever since we've been creating what we lovingly call disruptive inspiration. We have our series Man Enough that just started last year, which is all about creating a conversation around a dinner table amongst men to explore what the mythical masculine identity has been and how to uncover the truth of what it really means to be a man today. That has been getting letters back in droves from men who are saying, this has changed my relationships. It's getting letters back from women who are saying that it has helped the men that they love heal a lot of their deep wounds. Then we started a series called Project Upgrade to help empower young women pursue a viable career opportunity through STEM and understand that even though they were underrepresented now, perhaps tomorrow they could be more well-represented where they deserve to be. And My Last Days has turned into an annual television network special on the CW network, which, by the way, will be premiering this year, May 25th on CW, so watch out for it. And just last year, we partnered with some friends of ours from Canada, and we sold a show to CBS called Little Mosque on the Prairie. A show that will hopefully help change the narrative of how Muslim Americans are represented in media. And when I look back on all of this, when I look back at how I got here, a male Muslim American with Polish, Ukrainian roots, Egyptian this and that and all of the other, it starts to become really clear that who I am is exactly who I was at my roots. Roots turn into trees, and trees give off oxygen, they provide shade, they give us building materials or food, and they do it from a place of pure love, meaning they don't give to be given to. They give because they were meant to. And just like those roots, we as humans were meant to be of service to one another, to lift each other up, and to love each other. Not because we are getting something in return, but because we were meant to be of service to one another, because it's who we are at our roots. Thank you.